town and was just as much of a Crookshank staple then as it was now. The floors were a rich mahogany, the walls mostly exposed brick with paintings of the Irish countryside scattered around. There were stuffed animal heads, stained glass pictures, and a collection of antique clocks, half of which had the wrong time. There was also a shrine of paintings and pictures depicting the Quigley family going as far back as the early 1800s. And at the very center of the room hung an impressive chandelier of Irish whiskey bottles. The ceiling was the same dark mahogany as the floors, an exposed iron pipe stretched down with Edison light bulbs hanging from the ends. The place was everything an old Irish pub should be, or at least it was to Theo. It wasn't very long before Gavin was making his way back to the table with a pitcher of beer in hand, but he wasn't alone. Caroline Buchanan was next to him with a massive plate of loaded cheese fries. She was also pulling a shift behind the bar that night. "I figured you guys were working up an appetite," she said as she set the food on the table. Her hands were barely free before Max was grabbing her waist and pulling her toward him. "I am rather hungry," he grinned before leaning down and pressing his mouth to hers. She swayed a little in his arms, her dark brown hair brushing back and forth across her shoulders. Her left hand came up, cupping his jaw and making her engagement ring flash with the movement. Theo wasn't one to begrudge anyone their happiness, especially these two, but their public displays of affection were a bit much. He got it, they were making up for lost time. 14 years of lost time. They'd grown up together, Max spending his summers with his grandparents in Crookshank. Their friendship had turned into something more when they were teenagers, but life had gotten in the way. When Caro's mother had died, a tragic chain of events pushed them apart. That was until Max had come to town last summer and they'd pretty much picked up where they left off. There was no separating the duo now. That was evident by the fact that Max had given up a high six-figure salary to move down here and buy the old Kincaid Spring factory and turn it into a hotel. Theo didn't know if there was such a thing as soulmates, people who were fated for each other over anyone else. It wasn't like he hadn't grown up seeing happy couples. After 33 years of marriage, his parents were somehow still ridiculously in love with each other. But there was something about Caro and Max that made him buy into it a little bit more, even if he did roll his eyes at their antics, and he wasn't the only one. "The two of you are nauseating," Oscar gestured at them with a fry before he popped it into his mouth. "You're just jealous." Caro waggled her eyebrows at him. "Damn straight I am. I haven't been on a date in 2 months. You know how hard it is to find a man in this town?" "I do." Caro nodded. "Why do you think I was still single after all these years?" "I don't think that had anything to do with a lack of options." Gavin shook his head as he looked over to Max. "You were just waiting for him to come back." "You're right. I was," she said before she stretched up and pressed a kiss to Max's bearded cheek. And she did have to stretch as he was almost a foot taller than her. "Dating was a lot easier before I moved back here. A small town in the South isn't exactly a gay man's smorgasbord." Oscar had moved away when he'd gone off to college, and as he'd become a veterinarian, he'd been gone for a good 10 years before he returned. Crookshank had a way of keeping its residents, or drawing them back when they left. Max and Oscar were proof of that. Only 3.57 square miles, and a population of roughly 4,300. It was a small town with a big reputation. People loved it there, loved to live there, loved to visit there. That last part was evident by the fact that every season was tourist season. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Crookshank was the perfect retreat no matter the time of year. Spring brought blooming trees and flowers. Summer provided fish-filled rivers and the shimmering waters of Lake Lennox to cool off in. Fall had the mountains bursting with the colors of changing leaves, and winter turned the town into